it was so fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because this was the point where I wasn't known as anything but Brianna the Gamergate victim. I guess just being really truthful, it cost me so much more than I ever got back. I mean, I think people think that fame is an end in and of itself, and I have to tell you, like, it opens doors. Like, if I want to call up, like a major media outlet, they're more likely to take my call. But I also get yelled at for no matter what I do online, so there's a huge downside to it as well. The smartest thing for me to have done in Gamergate would be to just keep my mouth shut, like a lot of other women did. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I did that.
Hello?
Hello. How are
Hi,
you
how are
doing?
you? Good, how are you?
I'm awesome. I'm so psyched to be here.
I'm very excited as well. I did a lot of reading, and I still am very lost with Gamergate. So
Oh my God.
yeah,
It was a shit show at the Fuck Factory, so
yeah,
I do not blame you.
yeah. So how are you doing? First off, I guess.
Just to be honest with you, I'm kind of in the middle of a Twitter shitstorm right now,
Uh-oh.
so it's kind of been a tough 24 hours,
What happened? What shitstorm? It
So
can't.
it's
Okay.
amazing to me. I've got Jesse Single, who is a very not a good journalist in my estimation. I've got his people, they're screaming from the hills because I have critiqued his journalism that has at times struck me as transphobic, extremely
Oh.
transphobic and poorly researched. On the other, I replied to a Destiny tweet saying basically to the effect, I think trans people, when they're transitioning, should see a doctor, which upsets some people. So I'm
Yeah.
getting it from both trans people and people that hate trans people today. So it's been a very exciting 24 hours.
Oh yeah, you gotta love that. Oh, by the way, would you mind turning your camera on by any
Oh, is
chance?
it
Or
not on? Oh my goodness.
I think when I pull people
There
in,
we
then
go. There we go.
awesome. So great. So yeah, you're kind of like the queen of getting into Twitter shitstorms. So I guess I'm not super surprised at that.
I
But
don't know if I'm the queen. I feel like I've been a world-class contender. I feel recent years have made me a little more hesitant to shoot my mouth off, so maybe I'm getting a little better.
yeah. Okay, let me just check one last thing. Chat, audio okay? Give me the okay sign. Or don't give me the okay sign. Or just tell me. Okay. um, so, right. Okay. Okay, let's just, I guess, get started. So,
Let's get into it.
yeah.
Before we start, can I tell you, I love your lighting setup
Oh,
behind you.
thank
It is
you.
gorgeous.
I really appreciate that.
Do
Yeah,
you dedicate a whole room of your house to it like that? How do you do that?
Yep, I have like an office, and these are actually just window curtains, and I take some uplighting, and you just point it upwards, and depending on the color of the curtains that you get, it'll like make a weird glowy effect. So if it's like
Oh
if
my
it's white,
goodness.
yeah, it'll make kind of like a weird glowy effect if you have enough if you have it like the right lights and stuff like that. So
Have
yeah,
you ever seen CoffeeZilla's channel by chance?
I
He
have
does a
not.
lot
I've
of
heard of him.
news analysis. So what he does is he has a background, and to the best of my knowledge, like from my video game development knowledge, I'd bet a lot of money that his virtual background is developed in Unreal Engine. So I'll point at the
Oh,
ceiling right here. I've got a ceiling light right there.
yeah.
And what I want to do is take that ceiling light out and put a green screen behind me and then build like cool stuff in Unreal and then just have a
Yeah.
virtual background whenever I do interviews.
Oh, that would be super cool. Yeah. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people who do that. So yeah, and that can end up looking really nice. Can look better than like, real setups and stuff like that. So,
100%.
yeah.
My house is not, I can't dedicate a whole room to streaming. Like
Yeah.
this really is my office.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I totally get that. Yeah. I guess just to kind of get started here, and
yeah.
I'll let the audience know, guys. We'll do an audience question segment, so be sure to submit your questions in super chats, and I will take some time to read them after we've gone through everything. Um, so I guess just to get started, who is Brianna Wu? Can you tell us a bit about your background, how you became involved in gaming and tech industries, and who or what influenced you?
Sure. So I was adopted into a hyper right-wing family in Mississippi, which was a really, really, really weird way to grow up. So, my family was relatively rich, just because my dad, he joined the Navy to get his medical degree. So like we had relative money, but at the same time, I'm living in like the poorest state in America and going to see relatives, and it's literally trailer parks and just the shocking level of, frankly, poverty in Mississippi. So, I came from that background. I entered the tech startup world around the dot-com boom. I worked in politics for a while right after 9/11. I did some other things for a while. I worked as a journalist for many years, reporting on crime. And around 2008, I found myself in Boston. I just gotten married, and I thought to myself, why not start a game studio? And that's kind of where the more public part of my life picked up.
Mm-hmm. So would you consider yourself like a public figure before everything with Gamergate happened?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
I suppose I was known to a certain extent. I had a show on 5x5 and Relay, which are kind of the NPR of the tech industry.
Yeah.
And I'd been the keynote speaker at many a high-profile conference, but this is just like industry figure stuff. Like it's so segmented to like the Apple, developer community that I certainly didn't have a national profile, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. So I think from the beginning, you've been a vocal critic of the tech industry and its lack of diversity and inclusivity. Can you talk about some of the ways you think the industry can change to better serve the needs of underrepresented groups?
Sure. When I got into tech, I did not go into tech with the mission objective to be one of the better known feminists in the game industry, right? I just wanted to make games. And I got to tell you, game development is the hardest job I've ever had by far. It's harder than running for Congress. It's harder than being a journalist. It is technical, it is demanding, and the hours are brutal. So, when I got into game development, it was very much just wanting to ship games like anyone else. What I found, unfortunately, was literally the most sexist place I had ever worked by a wide margin. Even though I was out there and I'm raising money and I'm a head of development, right? I'm going to GDC, I'm having people talk to me like I'm a secretary. It was very, very belittling. I remember I would go to what we call postmortem in the game industry. It's like a local meetup event with game developers in Boston. And people would talk to my husband as though he was the game developer when Frank can't even update his iPhone.
Yeah.
So what I found was an environment that was just really, really stacked against women in a way that I couldn't believe. So I mostly just tried to keep my head down. Like I said, I was trying to get my company going. But when they started targeting women friends of mine during Gamergate, I really found that I had to speak up. So your question is, what is the industry doing wrong? And I think it's really important to emphasize these are not like villains in the game industry. This is not Snidely Whiplash twirling his mustache, like wanting to keep women out. Generally speaking, what you have is just a boys' club. The people that fund games, they all know each other and they fund people that look exactly like them. When it comes time to hire engineering positions or art positions, they just tend to hire people like them. So it really is, game development, in my experience, is an industry that doesn't have the same level of professionalism as, say, my husband's field, which is biotech, right? So there's just a lot of structural resistance there to women being heard in meetings or even getting their foot in the door in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, and it almost sounds like the way that you've described it, and I've worked in a few like male-dominated spaces myself.
You're on Twitch.
Yeah, Twitch, but before Twitch as well, I worked in a couple of male-dominated spaces, and I would say, I don't know that it's even like something that people are conscious of, right?
Right.
So people, they have these biases in their head, but they really aren't aware that they're even acting on them. And that's
Right.
probably some of the hardest, like culturally to kind of change, right? Because nobody feels like they're doing something wrong. So, yeah.
Right. And these are, yeah, it's really important to stress, at least for me, 99.9% of the time, these are people that you like. They're not bad people. They're just they're talking over you in meetings and they're not realizing it. Actually, can I tell you a story really quickly? So my co-founder, wonderful woman by the name of Amanda Warner, fantastic woman. So when we are sitting there and we're looking to hire animators, which was the first position we hired for my game studio, I took my husband out to a coffee shop and I'm like, okay, Frank, let's go through these resumes. Here's a pile for you. I'll go through my pile. And he's just going through piles and just looking at stuff and throwing it away. And he comes to one, and it's this animation of a girl standing up and going, and waving at the camera. And Frank just goes, and throws it in the pile. Yeah, I happened to see him do that. And I go, Frank, we've got a lot of women characters in this game. Like maybe that's someone we should put in the callback pile. He just had like an instinctual gut reaction that something that was girly in that context just wasn't something he valued. So yeah, I'm married to Frank. He's not sexist. He's a fantastic guy. He just has that little bit of bias that he had not thought about. And I think that's really the story of what happens to women in tech.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I definitely can see it even today, even in the medical field. And there have been studies that show that like women make better doctors. They spend more time with their patients. They are more attentive, things like that. But for the most part, the medical industry even has been like pretty sexist for a while, and things have improved. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see like across the board, people don't really realize the biases they have. Yeah, and it is people that you like. It's excellent people, people who don't mean any harm, things like that. So I can definitely relate to that.
I find this really exists in the Twitch space, if you don't mind me saying, because I think those biases really come through when it comes to who gets big, right? And I don't mean this as a dig at Hassan or Destiny or anyone like that. They're all really, really talented people. I just think for whatever reason with that algorithm, I think people generally speaking just want to see a guy talking on Twitch just a little more for whatever reason. And I think that's really unfortunate because I think we tend to have very homogenous conversations on Twitch. And this is certainly why I watch your channel. It's why I watch Kyla every time she's live. I just think there's a wider variety of people that I would like to see get a lot of, to have a voice, particularly in politics.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely could see that. Yeah, for sure. So your work with your studio, Giant Spacekat, you've been working on creating games that are more inclusive and representative of marginalized groups. What are some of the challenges you faced in pursuing that, and what successes have you had so far?
You're laugh at me. So when we shipped Revolution 60, you've got to understand this was back, this was 8 years ago. So the iPhone hardware was not as good as it was today. We didn't have the Metal API. As a matter of fact, Apple did not have, like Sprite Kit was the extent of like game development tools that they had. These old school iPhone games where you drag basically 2D sprites across the game. So one of the things that we ran into that drove me crazy is I wanted to make a game where this drives me crazy in games. So if you look, almost every time, every hairdo someone has, it will be an updo like this, and they'll put one joint right here, and the ponytail will flop up and down. They don't want to spend the bones to make hair look good. So one of the challenges that we had is I wanted to have women characters with really expressive faces and hair that would animate on, like with a bone structure, because physics didn't run on it. And because of this, we put so many of their joints in their face that they ended up in like skin tight costumes. And I wasn't thinking about it at all, because it's like the camera's on their face like 99% of the time. But oh my God, I was completely not prepared for just how much the conversation was going to be about like sexualizing the women characters in the games. Like, I'm a sex positive feminist. I just literally didn't think about it.
Yeah.
So I was completely blindsided that was 100% of the discussion about our art style, which is so frustrating, because I wanted it to be about the hair and the facial animation, the women voice actors that we had, and the fact that all of them got an arc. Like, I was not thinking about the right thing at all.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And the attention to detail on hair too is such like a woman thing,
Right.
So you would think that people would really appreciate that, the amount of detail that goes into that. But yeah,
Oh my
there's just
God.
always
Amanda sat there and literally animated hair joints. Like, sometimes when you play a game with various armor, watch the hair, because it will clip through someone's body all the time. And she went through and just made sure it all moved and bounced like naturally. And it was just the wrong engineering project to solve. So that was a big mistake.
Yeah. Okay, so your work has included a variety of roles, from game developer to CEO to political candidate. How do you balance these different responsibilities, and what skills have you developed that have helped you succeed in each of these roles?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I think that it took me a long time to recognize this, but I think growing up in the South has actually been my superpower throughout my career. The thing about the South is it's so poor that you don't even ask yourself what you can't do. I'll give you a really good example. One of my best friends growing up got a 1978 MGB and was like, our tire engine block is rusted shut. Let's figure out how to fix it. And I spent a whole summer over with him taking that car apart and learning how to fix it. That kind of like, I don't know, let's figure it out. That has been the most common thread throughout my career, whether it's starting in a game studio when I'd never developed a game before, or running for Congress. I kind of just leap into things, and I'm willing to learn as I'm going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really good trait to have. Yeah. So
it's got to be similar to Twitch, by the way, because there's no Twitch degree, as I understand it.
I think part of it is just, you kind of learn as you go, and you kind of can focus on different things, right? You kind of learn along the way, like, okay, how much of this is entertainment? How much of this do I want to be educational? Things like that. So you just kind of learn as you go. As far as that, speaking of which, notoriety online. So Brianna Wu, as the internet knows her, is someone shrouded in controversy. Plenty of online media outlets have written about you. There's even Encyclopedia Dramatica, which has a whole page dedicated to you.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. What are some common misconceptions about you as a person, you think?
It really bothers me that people think I'm not a fundamentally honest person. I take my integrity really, really seriously. And I think the reason why the storyline that, say, 4chan comes up with about me is so different than the one that, say, New York Times or Inc. Magazine or Washington Post or Nightline or Netflix or the series they're about to do. I think the reason why that storyline is so different is because you have journalists out there checking it. And they've come to some very different conclusions than, say, 4chan has. I think you grow a thick skin about it, but it's something you just have to live with. It's like to half of the internet, you're like a lying serial exaggerator, and you know in your heart it's not true. I mean, I'm not going to say I've done everything right over the last decade. I certainly haven't, but I've always tried to represent things honestly, and it really bothers me sometimes to hear, you know, people will drag up things that the internet just took out of context and
Yeah.
attack me with it as if it's fact, and that
Yeah.
happens every day. It's really exhausting.
I imagine so. I mean, even people who were on the opposite side of Gamergate to you, I think somebody I think about is like Mundane Matt is somebody who kind of got big on the Gamergate stuff, and even he, I remember talking to him, and even he has things that he doesn't even bother to address anymore because just the incorrect narrative is out there, the incorrect thought is out there, is viewed as like, you know, common knowledge, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And yeah, and so it's really interesting to see all of these figures from that time who would be on opposite sides of this issue, and see how much in common you know there is, like, after this whole thing has happened. So and also just to see, like, hindsight, like how many people distrust like people like Milo Yiannopoulos now. So
Well, you should, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but back then he was kind of like he was the guy breaking the news, leaking things, and people didn't really know him as well, right? So
I gotta tell
yeah.
you, I've had some interactions with Milo. He does not strike me as somebody fundamentally honest
Yeah.
in my estimation. I think he's someone who, you know, I know some people don't believe this about me, but my motivation in being in this space is genuinely to try to have my values represented and to try to leave the world a little bit better place
Yeah.
than I left it. I think for a Milo and for a lot of people, I think attention is an end in and of itself. And I think it's very painful when they don't have that. I've always seen the media side of my career to be something I have to be good at. But I think Milo is someone who will literally say anything, no matter how dishonest, to get a rise and get the attention he seems to be addicted to, in my view.
Yeah, I think so, and kind of backfired on him.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So how do you feel about, like, the Brianna Wu that's portrayed online then?
No, I think it's I mean, I have a lot of people that support me too. You know,
Yeah.
I got pretty far in my congressional run. You know, it's very weird to me, but there are a lot of people that consider me to be like someone they admire.
Yeah.
So I think you just learn to not take it seriously, if that makes sense to you. Like I can't change the minds of some people about how they feel about me. And to be honest, like some of the hero worship I get from some people is also, it's just this inflated view of me, right? So I try to tune it out and just be the best person I can, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. You ran for Congress in
I
2018.
did.
So how was that experience, and how did that
Woo!
shape your view on politics and activism?
Everybody should run for Congress, or you should run for something. It is it's an experience I think that made me a much better person. Just in the sense that before that, so many of my politics were based around you know, tech feminism, right? So I had not spent as much time talking to, say, the elevator construction union, right, or various local groups. It really forced me to get outside my bubble and meet some more people. It also really made me aware of what a professional job being a Politico is. You know, I was talking to a candidate today who's trying to stop a bunch of nut job anti-trans candidates from getting on the school board here locally. And, you know, just to be honest, she did not understand yet things about NGP or the win number or the voter file, a bunch of the nuts and bolts things that you need to understand to run a professional campaign. So what you walk away with is a much deeper understanding of just how to win elections, and it gives you a much more pragmatic view.
Definitely, definitely. So getting into Gamergate, I know, this is the more controversial stuff, but Gamergate kicked off in August 2014 with the Zoe post being spread around, basically accusing Zoe Quinn of infidelity, as well as sleeping with journalists in return for good video game reviews.
Which has proven to be a lie by every outlet in the world.
Were you paying attention to Gamergate when this happened, and what were your thoughts when this initially came out?
Well, first of all, I entirely disagree that it started with Zoe Quinn. Gamergate, in my view, started with Anita Sarkeesian.
Oh, really?
Launching
Okay.
Feminist Frequency. Certainly, Anita launching Feminist Frequency really ignited a very dedicated hate group on 4chan. Now, Zoe was certainly like the accelerant that really made it catch the entire industry on fire. But it really was like we were having more conversations in the game industry about like, say, Giant Bomb. Giant Bomb back then had never hired a woman despite being owned by CBS, and that's the kind of thing that's against EEOC laws, right? So a lot of people were pressuring Giant Bomb to not just hire another white guy, right? So we were starting to have conversations about that, women in the game industry asking, well, why can't you hire a woman this time? Why does this have to be a boys club every single time? Why has Giant Bomb been around for a decade, and every single time there's a new host, it's a white straight dude, right? What's going on here? This is a little weird, y'all. Gamergate was really the organized backlash to that. And it was really asymmetric warfare in the sense that women had more of a voice in the game industry, but at the same time, 4chan and what became 8chan and these angry message boards, they had a voice too. So it made all the stakes much, much higher.
Yeah. So according to the timeline, you weren't involved directly in Gamergate until September, a month after. Well, according to you, it would be several months, right?
Writing articles for Polygon about women colleagues, not Zoe Quinn, being targeted well before that. In fact, I wrote a piece called No Skin Thick Enough. That was one of the top pieces of Polygon that year. Just talking about abuse. So I got to tell you, it was my woke moment. What happened was Gamergate had started targeting people I cared about. I started getting death threats on Skype. It was a really, really bad time. So I wasn't targeted, like I wasn't known as one of the primary targets of Gamergate, but it was definitely affecting me behind the scenes.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that you made a joke Twitter account.
Did I?
Or was it a joke Twitter post? Mocking the Gamergaters, is that accurate? And that kind of set things off, or that's what I saw in the timeline, at least. That essentially you made a joke Twitter account mocking Gamergaters, and then a lot of hate got directed your way.
It's been so long. You've got to understand Gamergate, because of the PTSD I developed, it's a little bit of a blur. So I'll take your word for that. But I truly don't remember that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Gamergate was characterized partly. So we've got the obvious perspective of people wanting more inclusion, more diversity, more representation in this space. And then we have the characterization by gamers who are aggravated with game journalists. They perceive to kind of be like outsiders in a way, who are writing about their space. And you as a game developer were never really an outsider, but did you feel like you were treated like one?
By the men in the industry? Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's not to say that Gamergate didn't have some theoretical points about, I mean, these were issues that the game industry itself had struggled with for a long time. I mean, Jeff Gerstmann leaving GameSpot infamously over Kane and Lynch 2 was the exact kind of thing that Gamergate purported to be about. I think, really my objection is, it was primarily about harassing women in the game space looking to, advocate more inclusion, in my view.
Okay. So when I was talking with a few men who were involved in kind of following Gamergate, they voiced an interesting concern. And
Sure.
they said that there are very few places that are like considered male-only spaces left, and that Gamergate was partly a reaction to the diminishing of these male-only spaces. Do you think that
Yeah.
there is a real concern that some of these men felt, or when they feel that male-only spaces are under a threat?
Yeah, I think that's entirely valid. Yeah, obviously, I don't agree that the answer is to engage in hiring
Yeah.
discrimination, but I think that's, this is why when the Gamergate television show comes out, it's not about what happened to me, Zoe, and Anita. It's looking at what's happening with all the young men involved with this. And, I think that it's become very apparent to me that we can't solve the problem of women being mistreated without asking this question, like, why are so many young men so lonely and adrift? I think those two questions are very much linked. And I don't think you can. I've come to the conclusion, and this upsets some feminist friends of mine, but I don't think we can shame men into like being better and creating these spaces for women or giving women fair opportunity. I think any approach that's ultimately going to work is going to have to be about all of us putting
Yeah.
all of us forward, right? And recognizing that, yeah, there's some truth that video games are a space for under-socialized men. That's just a fact. It's also true that, women are mistreated in this field. So how can we address both of those things together? That it's very clear to me that's the way forward.
Yeah, and certainly with online spaces, a lot of people are like turning to online spaces for their socialization. So it's only going to grow to be utilized by more people that are not male. So yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. This is kind of a multifaceted issue, and you can't really address one problem without addressing the other.
I've told this story a lot, but something that really changed my opinion on Gamergate is I gave a talk at a college that was actually really close to me, and I go there. I'd never met a Gamergater before in person, but he came up after my speech and started talking to me, and it's the exact kind of person that sent me death threats and rape threats, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and I'm like, this guy is not a monster. He's just really, really lonely and doesn't understand how he's making women feel, which is adding to the loneliness, right? It was a light bulb moment for me because I really saw him as, I don't want to say someone I pitied, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
I felt really sorry for that person in that moment because the thing he needed to do to get better was to go to therapy or make some just platonic girlfriends, spend some time around there, learn how to not make women uncomfortable, not make sexist jokes, right? Like not be so angry. And it was really apparent to me how any ideology that might come along and promise him easy answers about how he is the victim in that situation. I can really understand being susceptible to that.
Yeah, definitely. So, some people have suggested that Gamergate is part of a larger cultural backlash against diversity and inclusivity in gaming
Yeah.
and other forms of media. What's your take on that argument? And do you think gaming demographics were changing around that time and people were in denial, or do you think that there was a genuine want for diversity, I guess, in gaming? So,
Okay, so two parts of that. I
yeah.
think the fact that Steve Bannon, one of the primary architects of Gamergate, went to go work at the White House and then enforce a bunch of crazy policies. I think it was part of a wider backlash against inclusion and, frankly, white supremacy, in my view. I'm sorry, the second part of your question, what was that again?
So one critique I've heard from people who were kind of on the Gamergate side, they say that like, oh, the demographics weren't really changing that quickly.
Oh.
You know, they're basically saying that oh, there wasn't really that big of a change, that there was already diversity. I don't see why we needed to do more, et cetera, et cetera. So
That's not true. One study I saw from the NES when I was growing up, around 1987, I believe the study was done, showed that women gamers were 3%. By the Super Nintendo era, that number had grown to 8% of gamers. By the time I founded my game studio, that number was about 17%, and today women are actually the majority of gamers. So no, this is a growing part of the market. I don't agree with that assessment at all.
Yeah. One thing I've heard people say, I've brought up that as well, that, women make up at least 50%, if not more, of gamers nowadays. I've heard people say, well, they play mobile games. It's not really the same thing. I don't know why mobile games would all of a sudden invalidates it, even if that's true, right? Like,
Sure.
I don't know why it would invalidate it. It just seems like, they're gamers.
Do you play Final Fantasy 14? There are a lot of women when I do dungeon hops. So
I haven't played much video games, but I like to watch the kind of culture around it. So
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say they're playing women when I play Call of Duty or Final Fantasy 14. Or even Alien Fire Team. In my experience.
Yeah. So I guess the next question I have is, I was reading up on the timeline, and somebody popped out to me, Ethan Ralph, somebody who I've had interactions with.
Oh no!
So
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I deal with a lot of.
Has he been good to you?
Yeah, in some ways.
Wow.
So I deal with I literally will talk to anybody. That's like literally my one thing my one rule that I have is I'll literally talk to no matter who they are. But essentially, I heard that he got kicked out of RavenCon. What's your kind of relation to him, and what exactly happened around, if you remember? So
I'm just being completely honest with you.
Yeah.
Ethan Ralph, there were so many components of Gamergate, so many death threats, so many rape threats, so many trying to get people prosecuted. I remember him running a blog and him just writing complete nonsense about me, and I remember him going to jail, which made me very happy at the time. I truly wish I could tell you. I'm sure if I read about it, it would spark a bunch of memories. I don't. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I just know that he got kicked out of RavenCon, and I believe he blamed you for it. But I don't know how.
Oh, right. That was a science fiction convention, wasn't it?
I think so. I think it was.
My husband was one of the guests of honor, and he came there to harass me and got kicked out for something, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah. I think that's what I see. Because I'm looking at his articles now, and it looks like he did write quite a bit about you. And they're. So, anyways, moving on. Let me just remind the chat once again, guys. If you have questions for Brianna, feel free to submit them in super chats. I will be having a segment towards the end where we'll read some audience questions. And somebody says, "Wait, Ethan Ralph, always good times." I think this is somebody in the chat who, I don't know. I have a weird variety of people in my chat. Anyways, right. Reflection on Gamergate. So, some people have accused you of exploiting the Gamergate controversy for personal gain. What would you say to those critics? And what do you say to people accusing you of faking harassment online?
Oh my God. I didn't have to fake harassment. Newsweek did a study that looked at who the most threatened person was online, and unfortunately I won that. So
Wow.
I didn't have to fake any harassment against me. It was out there for people to see. Gamergate destroyed my game studio, right? What I found so frustrating is I'd spent all this time and money and energy basically trying to ship one game, and my goal with it was to just do it well enough with the first game that I would have the credibility to then go to the money men that write dudes $1 million checks and get a second game funded. And we won a Game of the Year award from iMore, which is very prestigious. Kotaku gave us a rave review. I urge you to go read it. It's beyond positive. They called it, I believe, like the first mobile game where I genuinely lost a sense of time. We worked so hard, and I was trying to line things up so I would be able to, go to the venture capitalist route. Something I have experience with, by the way. It was so fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because this was the point where I wasn't known as anything but Brianna the Gamergate victim, right? And I'd try to get the news media to write stories about my work, the Revolution 60 PC port. I couldn't get them to write a story about my game studio releasing a new thing. Like the same people that wanted to write 1 million stories about me as a victim, of harassment.
Yeah.
And I guess just being really truthful, it cost me so much more than I ever got back. I mean, I think people think that fame is an end in and of itself. And I have to tell you, like, it opens doors. Like, if I want to call up, like a major media outlet, they're more likely to take my call. But I also get yelled at for no matter what I do online. So there's a huge downside to it as well. The smartest thing for me to have done in Gamergate would be to just keep my mouth shut, like a lot of other women did. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I did that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, I guess me, like, a few years ago probably wouldn't have understood what it's like to be in the position where being quiet is the safe thing to do. And now, after like kind of being in the sphere for a while, I can definitely see it, right? Nobody wants to be viewed as like a victim of anything, right? Nobody wants their claim to fame to be that they were a victim of something. Nobody wants their claim to fame to always outweigh every accomplishment that they do. And also being in the position that you're in, you're right that it is like very damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So
what was the name of that woman that I'll keep it vague because I don't want to risk anything. There was a woman that was in the middle of basically she was sexually assaulted at a party and then got excommunicated from a major Twitch streamer space. Was that good for her career? Like, is she popping off nowadays? I mean, in my view, I see that situation as very much echoes of Gamergate. Like, that's the main thing I know about her and not her work. Like, it's very much not to your career advantage to be known as someone that was harassed, which is why so many people are just silent on this.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions because, I've interviewed a couple of people who were like on the pro Gamergate side. And so I think they'll be very mad if I don't ask you a couple of questions.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So I'm going to share a screenshot with you. And
I bet I know which one it is.
Okay. Awesome. So this screenshot is of a Steam, what looks like a Steam chat.
Steam store page? Yep.
Yeah, Steam store page, yep. And it's written by somebody with the username Spacekat Gal. It says developer. And it says, is GSX head of development and noted feminist Brianna Wu a terrible person? 8chan, Gamergate, and Kotaku in action, knock yourselves out. So what somebody brought this up to me for is that they said they basically said that you outed yourself as faking harassment through this post, and that I know, and that that essentially the only way that this could have happened is if you were like switching accounts or something like that. What is your explanation of this screenshot?
So this is one of these Gamergate myths where you come to a conclusion, you don't think through it. So at this point, it was me trying to get the Steam release out the door.
Mm-hmm.
We'd been trying to develop it, and it'd been brutal because I'd been trying to get my death threats prosecuted the whole time. So we get greenlit on Steam, which was very prestigious back then, and I just didn't even think about what would happen. And instantly, Gamergate finds the Steam discussion page and starts endlessly avalanching it with Brianna Wu sucks, Revolution 60 sucks, blah, blah, blah. Brianna is horrible. I'm trying to talk about the lighting features that we changed for the game. And my thought at the time was, okay, if I make this one thread for people to attack it here, then I can just siphon off all the discussion about me because I can't live on this site and, delete every single comment. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them popping in every second. So I was trying to quarantine the personal attacks on me, right? So I could have some threads there talking about, hey, we upgraded the sound here. We added this new level. There are new cutscenes. We redid the skeletal meshes. We are no longer constrained to an iPhone, so we can go through and do all this dynamic lighting. What was so frustrating is I couldn't get any of that information out because Gamergate was hijacking this. And by the way, like, there are other screenshots that Gamergate never mentions here, where they basically planned ops to destroy my game studio with false reviews and stuff exactly like this. So, was it a great idea at the time? No. I'm a gamer. I have a sarcastic sense of humor. I've got thick skin. I think it reads there like 8chan, 4chan, knock yourselves out. I think it's pretty obvious what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely, now that you explain that to me, at least it makes sense to me. The second screenshot that I wanted to show is this this Twitter screenshot where somebody I was talking with, Short Fat Otaku, or Dev is what he goes by. He thought that this was suspicious because the tweet, you responded to the tweet 19 seconds after it was posted. And he thought that back then that it would have been really hard on Twitter to have replied 19 seconds after a post has just been tweeted. And that essentially there's no way she must have tweeted this from another Twitter account and responded to it and found it really quickly or something like that. What would you say in response to that?
It's just a lie. I mean, there's no proof there. It's just him speculating. So
okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So those were the two questions that I had a lot of requests, people asking me to ask about.
You know what I've been thinking about doing? Dev, if you want to pay for a polygraph person to come to my house, I would be fucking goddamn delighted to take a polygraph and say that both things I just said here were true. In fact, I would take a polygraph about anything I said during all of Gamergate. Because I didn't lie during Gamergate. I told the truth. There's this crazy set of people that's exactly like the vaccine deniers and the election deniers, where they just have a narrative and they're going to fit all the facts to do that narrative, and it's put the victim on trial. But I did not lie about anything during Gamergate. There's no evidence that I lied about anything. As a matter of fact, the reason the media reported on me so positively is because I told the truth. And I'm frankly tired of your bullshit.
Based, very, very based, and quite the challenge too. So you heard it here first, guys. Polygraph test is on the table if you want it, especially to Dev. I don't know if Dev is listening right now. So when it comes to history, you can't really write about it accurately in the moment. And that's why I think it's important now that 9 years later, people are reflecting on what happened during Gamergate. And as time has gone by, has your perspective changed on anything involving Gamergate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In your opinion, what are some of the key issues that Gamergate raised, and how do you think they can be addressed?
So it's a much wider conversation, but something I've really been struggling with is, feminism. I've never seen feminism weaker in my lifetime. I've never seen less discussion about what women are facing at work. We lost Roe last year, and there's clearly something that the feminist community has done tactically that has not served us. And I'm not sure what that is, but I know that we need to do something better. And I think that the thing about Gamergate is I really was dealing with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of explicit death and rape threats a day. You can't have someone like send you fanfic about how they're going to cut the skin off your body and eat it in front of you, like as they torture you to death, and not have that really, really, really deeply affect you, right? So I was traumatized. At the same time, I think, I wish in hindsight I had been more able to reach inside myself and show more steadiness and have been less reactive in my response to it. I saw the girl that did the gym video the other day where she's obviously uncomfortable and she's trying to get in shape, and like this guy's staring at her, and she posts something that just ignites this, low energy gender war online, right? And I think, unfortunately, that's what Gamergate ended up being, was this gender war between men and women when I needed to be pushing for more structural reforms at work. And I wish I'd been a better leader on that in hindsight.
So I guess, I guess in response to what you're saying as well, like it's one thing to think that somebody like faked, a harassment claim here or there, but you really can't fake hundreds of harassment, hundreds of harassment and threats coming your way. That's like impossible to fake, and who has the time in the day to even do that? So I mean, that's one question I would have for people on the other side. Like, how much time would it take for somebody to fake this amount of harassment, and how much time do you think that somebody would dedicate to that? So what do you see as the future of Gamergate, and how do you think the movement will evolve over time?
Oh, God. Well, I hope it's over, though I don't think it is. The problem with Gamergate is it's a tactic. Put someone on trial, find someone you don't like, go through their whole life, catalog everything they've ever said that you don't like, attack their credibility, and turn them into a monster. What is so disheartening to me is the left fucking does this every day now to people they don't like. So unfortunately, everything is Gamergate now, and I fundamentally failed on my mission objective to stop that.
So that's really interesting that you say that, because when I was talking to a Gamergater, they felt like their side failed, which is really interesting. Yeah. So it's almost, one person who was anti-Gamergate, one person who was pro-Gamergate. Well, really, more than anti, you were a victim, or you were harassed by Gamergate.
They destroyed my life. They gave me clinical PTSD. They wrecked my game studio. I had to move. They really seriously fucked my life up.
Yeah, and so nobody feels like their side won, it's really interesting how that happened. So you've received arguably some of the most targeted harassment online in comparison to other figures of a similar notoriety. How do you think you fared? What got you through the harassment you received? And were there any moments that you thought you couldn't make it through?
That's a really hard question. I think, the fact that I was 10 years older than both Zoe and Anita when it happened, I think it gave me a little bit more of a tolerance to it, if that makes sense. So I think being older served me pretty well. You know, I was in my very early 30s at that point. So um, I don't think I did it. I don't think I did it perfectly, but I think if you look at my comments back there, it was very rarely about what was happening to me personally. It was talking about women in the video game industry and trying to make it a better workplace overall. That was always my message. And what got me through was trying to fight for something that was bigger than myself. You know, today when I look at a byline at IGN or GameSpot, you know, the odds are much better that there's going to be a woman reviewing it today than there was 10 years ago. We do have more women working at the bottom of the industry. We're not quite making it to the top yet, but there is an improvement in a lot of the numbers, the gender numbers, as far as who's making games and who's covering games. So I think I'd say to those women, no, like your position came at an extremely high cost to a lot of people out there. And that's work that I'm really proud of. Something I've really struggled with is I worked so hard to get Twitter to improve their harassment rules, particularly around trans harassment, and seeing Elon Musk just dismantle all of these really good policies that we fought tooth and nail for in back channel. It really feels like my life's work has been dismantled in many ways. So that has been very disheartening.
Yeah. So if you're gonna, I guess if you were to like, and this is more like kind of just taking into the consideration the Gamergaters who were not like responsible for like the harassment, the people who disavowed harassment, things like that. Do you think that there were any things that they said that you could have agreed with, or that any fears that they had that had, you know, some validity to it?
Yeah, I think there are some Gamergaters. It's actually, I have a friend of mine, and I know will upset some people to know there is a mod over at Kotaku in Action that's a friend of mine, but it's true. I really think he just honestly, he has a worldview where he wants to get any kind of political analysis out of video games and wants it to just be what is the feature, what are the graphics, and to just keep the social commentary out of it. I don't agree with that point of view because I don't think you can do it with art, but I genuinely believe that was his mission objective with getting involved.
Okay. So one chatter asks, can Brianna comment on the GOP calling for trans people's deaths? Was it exactly worded like that? I don't remember that.
I think it was very heavily implied at
Yeah.
at CPAC. Michael Knowles was talking about completely eliminating quote, I hate this word, I find it offensive, but transgenderism from public life, as if you could have don't even get me started. You know, you can't have transgenderism eliminated from public life without eliminating transgender people from public life, which to my mind means forcing people to detransition or forcing them to completely lose any access to the public square. So I find it extremely disturbing. You know, I have trans family members that are, you know, young and they're just trying to make their way in the world, and I'm extremely troubled by this development. I think this is why the work I'm trying to do and the work I would hope the trans community would join me in is we need to really focus on public policy. We don't have time to, you know, pick apart people on Twitter anymore. We need to focus on winning elections, raising money, getting people out to vote, forcing Democratic politicians to, you know, pass civil rights legislation. We really need to get serious and raise our level of professionalism because, in my view, the transgender civil rights movement is on course oblivion right now. And we've got to change tactics. I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. There's a lot of terminally online kind of problems I feel like we argue about. So yeah, paying attention to real life politics and local politics too, I think is super.
To be fair to the trans community, though, there's not a civil rights organization out there fighting for them the way that they deserve. There's no, HRC is a great organization for gay men. Historically, they've faced some extreme allegations of discrimination against trans people, allegations I personally find very compelling. And just if you look at the history of rights they've gotten passed, they've thrown trans people under the bus at every opportunity for gay men, right? So I think historically the odds of HRC coming to the rescue of the trans community are very, very low. I think you have Lambda Legal. They are excellent. The National Center for Transgender Equality is great, but they don't have the funding they need to be a 50-state organization. The ACLU, as far as I can tell, they're far more interested in using trans people to fundraise than aggressively pushing legislation. So I think in some ways, like the terminally online aspect of trans people is because there's just no one out there fighting for them. So I understand it, but somebody needs to found something that is kind of a true 50-state strategy, in my view.
Yeah. Somebody in chat asks, what do you do or work on now? I don't think any of what you did were failures, just growth. I think you're a very strong person and have grown to appreciate your point of view.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Right now I work with Jank over at Young Turks. I am the head of, I am the executive director of Rebellion PAC. We are one of a very few progressive super PACs in this country. And we think of ourselves as the special forces. When someone is running for office and no one else is going to stand with them, we've got the tools. We'll donate money, we'll do data analytics, we'll develop ads, we'll get volunteers to you. We are the special forces team for progressive candidates, and I am extremely proud of the work we've done. Right now we're working on some big data plays for 2024 that I'm extremely excited about.
Okay. Let me just see. I think, wait, somebody let me see here. Sorry, I got distracted by chat. Yeah, I think it was a really interesting, for us to kind of build a bridge in some ways. And I think it's really, I think a lot of people will be surprised. As you said, because of how Gamergate happened and how much attention there was and how much news was coming out of one side, I think people didn't really get to see a lot of your perspective. And they'll realize that you're much more moderate on things than you were portrayed to be. So I think
Consider this, the game industry, the media is very happy to cover a story about a woman in danger. They're not really as excited to publish a story about structural, HR reform in the video game industry and increase liability for, discrimination, right? So I looking back at it now, I realized that a lot of the media coverage did not help us in many respects. And I'm not sure I would do everything the same way again today.
Okay. Somebody wanted to ask what your thoughts are on Phil Fish.
Phil Fish.
He's like a game
Oh, that's
developer.
the Fez dude, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I've interacted with him a few times. It's been perfectly pleasant. I think, as I recall, he got tired of getting screamed at from people on the internet and just quit his career, which is something I definitely understand. So, yeah, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it myself.
Yeah. Somebody asked in the chat, Brianna, have you considered starting your own channel?
I have. I think that my first best purpose in life is not to be a Twitch streamer. I think one of the things I'm good at is raising money. and I don't think that there are enough women with our voice in politics. So I think that being an executive director is a better destiny for me. I will say this, Stardust, and I'd love to talk to you about this. Something I've thought a lot about is the right wing has their own media Death Star, right? For whatever reason, we don't have that on the left in the same way. I've often thought to myself, what would it take if I were going to launch a 21st century CNN? The thing I would do is I'd go do a raise round for 5 or 10, $20 million. And I'd try to get Vosh and, just a whole bunch of Twitch streamers doing political content. And I'd try to make that a channel with like a scheduling block every single day. And then get our message out there to a new audience the way that the right does. So I haven't thought about starting my own channel. I've thought a lot about doing a raise round and trying to get some figures on the left like Vosh under contracts like the Daily Wire has. I think we have a ton of talent on the left, but I think that for whatever reason, they're all doing their individual thing, and I think we're not all trying to move in the same direction. And I think if we all work together, we would be able to have a bigger impact on things. So I'm probably not gonna start my own channel, but I might. I've thought a lot about starting my own company.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I kind of, from what I can see, and again, I interact with a lot of people across the aisle. It seems that part of the reason why things like the Daily Wire kind of popped up was because not only did conservatives feel like there was nothing beyond Fox News for them that represented their opinion, they also felt like a lot of them felt like Fox itself wasn't that great. And so we had all these mid-level or smaller media corporations popping up by Ben Shapiro and by whoever else, Bannon or whoever else popping up, because the conservatives were in a place where they didn't trust Fox, they didn't trust CNN, they didn't trust any of the mainstream media, and they felt like the conservative media that did exist didn't serve them. And so as like liberals and lefties, we kind of had the benefit of things like CNN kind of existing. We always, we're fine with it existing, we're fine with what they did for the most part. And so we didn't really have to work to build these media organizations the same way that conservatives did. And I think that's why we see a gap now in, when we look at like big conservative commentators online, like people like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, other really big content creators online, versus the biggest content creator we have is Hassan. So yeah.
And Hassan is fantastic. What I want to, it's interesting with Ben Shapiro, he didn't just magically become a hit. Like someone invested multi-million dollars in ads for his show in the Daily Wire and kept operating at a loss until it became to operate at a massive profit. We need something like that on the left in the same.
I think so.
In the same way. Yeah.
I think the closest thing that I've seen or to like a news organization is like the Young Turks, I think.
Sure.
But other than that, and I don't think they're even that large in comparison. So
I've talked to Cenk a lot about this, and I think he is correct that Twitch is very much a winner-take-all system. I mean, Hassan is the biggest, right? And it does seem to serve a very few people at the tippy top. What I really appreciate about Twitch is I think it's been adopted by a younger generation. I can tell you as someone who, I'm 40, so I come in and look at this and I see, okay, it's more interactive. There's a lot more intimacy, like with you and the hosts. Some of the personalities out here are doing work that rivals anything going on talk radio. It's truly a different medium. And I think, like Facebook, there's going to be a moment where people in their 30s and 40s notice Twitch and notice just how great a place this is to spend time. And I think that's when it's really going to see this hyper growth. I think from my view, I think Twitch concentrates too much on material that only like serves a very narrow, very, very young audience, right? I can only watch so many drama streams. I love Amaranth, but I'm not going to watch her in a hot tub. That's just not my thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a wider variety of programming here that can take advantage of this really, really awesome two-way medium. I think there needs to be some leadership.
I think so too. I think that definitely you've identified a gap there. So, I didn't have any other questions on my interview list, but I know you had like a couple of topics you wanted to discuss as well.
I appreciated you kind of losing your temper with Lav the other day. I would love to talk about that.
Well, it was really more with Shaylin than with Lav, but I had a lot to say to Lav too because.
Yep.
You know, she had kind of been in the Destiny space for a while, and I understand that you know, she disliked me for the whole, you know, hashtag pubegate thing, right? But you know, I tried to deal with that the best way that I could, and I tried to be one of the few people that kind of empathize with Lav and tried to see things from her perspective. But like, without a doubt, she was always such a massive bitch to me, like every single time. And anytime I would try to be nice to her on a stream or anything like that, she would just have something smart and something really mean to say. And it was always hypocritical too, because she, you know, of her accusations towards Hassan and her accusations on her TikTok. So, you know,
can I just say something here?
Yeah.
The fact that she went after you so hard for Pubegate and then did that to Hassan, that was the moment I was just like, fuck this woman, right?
Yeah.
It was so bad. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was good to kind of get that out of my system, but then I don't know what happened with Shaylin. Shaylin came on and her voice was just really grating to me, and she was already yelling at everybody, and then I just
she's
kind of
screeching, and the stuff she's saying is just not.
Yeah,
I feel like I know a thing or two about harassment. I really do. I genuinely think of myself as someone that understands harassment, and you know, for her to come on here, and Shaylin, I mean, and start screeching at you, you're enabling harassment and this and that. It's like, I can tell you as someone who is cited as an expert in media often over harassment, Lav is not the victim of harassment. Lav is a harasser. I feel very confident the history is going to bear that out.
Yeah, and on a larger scale, right? Like, once you've experienced a large amount of harassment, you kind of know what's like normal, you know, what's kind of a normal equilibrium from both sides, and then you kind of understand harassment in a different light. Like what's really what's people mad at you for an action, or what is some actual undue harassment. And so I'm sure that that's something that definitely informs you as well.
Yeah, there is. So one of the really big changes for me in how I saw harassment is there's a really big difference in being a game developer and getting a death threat or a really pointed criticism, and a really big difference in being a congressional candidate and getting those exact same words. And the difference is, you know, I went to the FAC, I filled out a form, I'm running for office, there's a high degree of public scrutiny that goes along with that, right? In my view, if you are a Twitch streamer, there's a certain amount of scrutiny of what you are doing that is going to come with the job. And I'm not going to say that everything aimed, certainly at women, I think it can frequently cross the line. But I think the majority of criticism of that situation was really just based on actions. And I think it just comes along with the job. So if you never want to be criticized, my suggestion would be don't go into Twitch streaming. It's not a career that's going to serve you well.
Yeah. And even then I would, you know, I can acknowledge that as a woman online, I'm sure she does get
Yeah.
some hate like a little bit more intense, right?
100%.
But it's still the result of actions at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Somebody in chat wanted to ask you, I'd like to hear Brianna's take on a game she's enjoyed playing in the past. For example, I noticed she's a fan of Parasite Eve.
Yes, I love Parasite Eve. So if you look at that poster, that is an original poster of Parasite Eve from Japan.
Oh, wow.
Back in the 90s. So, oh God, I mean, I'm a huge gamer. I'm literally the second fastest Princess Peach speedrunner in the entire world. It's Super Mario 2.
Wow.
I just did that at Games Done Quick. I'm very proud of that. Right now I'm playing Wo Long, Fallen Dynasty, which is very similar to Elden Ring. I'm completely addicted to that. I'm one of the fastest speedrunners in the entire world at Resident Evil 3 remake, and I'm really looking forward to Resident Evil 4 coming out next week. So I'm going to completely break that game apart. Also, if you look at the background here, these are all Capcom CPS2 games. I love all of these. Darkstalkers is by far my favorite.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome.
I'm a huge old gaming nerd, if you can't tell.
That's really cool. Yeah. I just kind of observe from the outside. I'm like I play some games, but I'm not super knowledgeable in them. So I'm like the exact opposite of like everybody online that I interact with, essentially. So yeah.
What did you put all your skill build points into? If you didn't game, what do you do for fun then?
I just like socializing with people. I really like, I like talking to people. I like to understand, especially online controversies and things like that. I really find it very fascinating. So, interviewing people who have been the targets of a huge, wave of harassment, people who've had their entire movements turn on them, things like that are super fascinating to me because I don't think anybody anticipates that. Right. And so, for example, I interviewed, for example, Richard Spencer is somebody I've interviewed, and
wow.
And I interviewed him, and one of the biggest things that I thought in my head is this is somebody who saw his entire movement turn on him, and essentially, and there was a meme going around about him getting punched in the face, like that. That is like
I didn't like that, to be honest with you. I'm not going to personally chide people to not cheer somebody getting punched in the face, but I do think in a democracy we need to solve our differences at the ballot box, and I think when you're cheering on violence, I think generally speaking that is fundamentally contrary to our values, so it's not something I participate in.
No, I mean, it's just I find a lot of these people in these situations who weather that type of harassment and that type of long extended criticism for a really long time really interesting.
Really?
Yeah. So
see, from my point of view, I think Gamergate was novel in 2008, and I think everyone is living through their own mini version of Gamergate today. I think for you with Pubegate, I think you got a small degree of that, right?
Yeah, it was deserved, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend what you did, but I understand the perception that you have. I think you were speaking honestly at the time. I think the lesson I wanted people to take from Gamergate is that there were bad tactics. Yeah, I think unfortunately every side just decided there were bad targets, and it's okay if you do it to someone else, but you can't do it to the people on our side. And I really think it's just led to this. I think it's really tough for women to have a career in 2023, just because you get targeted so much. Women journalists are targeted like never before. Certainly Twitch streamers, like we're all public figures now in our own way, and it's causing a lot of damage in my view.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it's true, like people do deal with their own mobs of hate at different extents and different sizes for sure. I don't know. I think it's just, there is something very remarkable about people who are able to weather that, and especially you, like being able to deal with that amount of harassment definitely takes like a lot of fortitude. So
See, you keep saying that. From my point of view, it's just I just did what I had to do. I mean, yeah, my family disowned me when I came out. I was adopted, and then my adopted family just threw me away like a piece of garbage when I came out to them. Like, I have no family in this world other than Frank. That's the hardest thing I ever went through. Gamergate certainly gave me trauma, but I mean, I just saw it as doing what needed to be done. The same way when I ran for Congress. It's not that I uniquely think I'm like going to be an amazing congresswoman, but I genuinely felt in that moment people needed to stand up against Donald Trump and fascism in this country. I still see it that way. So maybe it's I grew up on naval bases, and maybe it's that military part of me coming out, but I really think there's a such thing as duty, and I think you should fight for the things you believe in. And I think the destiny of women in the game industry, that's a cause worth fighting for. In this country, that's a cause worth fighting for. So I always just saw it as what had to be done.
Yeah, definitely. Were there some other topics you want to talk about? I know that you found the apolitical thing interesting.
Yeah, tell me about this, because I think I misunderstood one of your tweets. Tell me more about this.
So I kind of I don't know. I feel like I've been burned out for a while, and I thought one day. Sometimes I like to meme, and I thought one day it would be really funny if I just announced I was apolitical and really leaned into being an apolitical political streamer. Sure. Yeah, and I knew it would make people mad because I would phrase it with like, "Oh, I'm leaving the left," right? And and people already, because of how I talk to people and the different types of people I talk to, assume that I'm a centrist or like a right winger or whatever. So I thought it would be really funny if I just made a tweet saying I'm leaving the left, but I'm also not going to the right, but I'm also not going to the center. I'm just apolitical now. And I thought, there's no way people are going to get that mad about this. They're going to see it's a meme. But there were people who like legitimately lost their minds at it. So really? It was really funny. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what I saw. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, I saw that, and so we don't know each other well, though I hope we can become friends.
Yeah.
But I saw that, and my first thought was, I fucking get it. Yeah. I really, really, really understand how someone would look at the way that we're talking about politics and advocating for things and just say, fuck this. This is not constructive. I'm out.
Yeah.
So I really read that, and I saw it as a real failure of the entire system to give people a productive outlet to advocate for political change. So maybe that was too much of a read into it, but that was very much my first thought.
I mean, I think I've been burned out for a while, partly just it feels like there's a lot of virtue signaling and not really a whole lot of like actual conversation happening. So, I mean, I think that there is some truth to what you're saying, and there are people who do identify as apolitical because of, what you're talking about. They feel like there's not really a productive avenue to advocate for policies and advocate for changes in the political system. So there's definitely something there, I think.
Yeah. An honest question. I've never, people use this phrase all the time, virtue signaling. And I truly don't understand what it is. I mean, I understand what it's supposed to mean, but when you say that, do you think there are people out there that are just pretending to feel a certain way for credibility online? What does that mean?
Not necessarily. So yeah. I think people do genuinely feel the way that they do, but I think there are a lot of people who are more willing to kind of dramatically what's the way to say this, kind of make a scene about something that they believe in rather than actually do things that would help that cause. So so people are much more likely to what's a good example on the right of virtue signaling? I mean, I would say like the right-wing alarmism over like drag queens, right? And people are afraid about like the welfare of children and children being groomed, but the primary groomers of children are people within their families, right? That kind of seems like a little bit of like a virtue signal to me if I were going to. And they may honestly believe that they're, have incorrect beliefs about drag queens, but we know that there's like a bigger problem with who actually grooms children, who actually abuses children.
Yeah, I've never been able to put my finger on why I find this phrase problematic, because I don't know. I think in the right-wing example, I think they genuinely believe those things.
Yeah,
they
do.
I don't think they're pretending not to. I think it's I think my objection of it is we would both agree that there is a hyper-emotionality around a lot of political issues that is not conducive to any kind of resolution in the public policy space, right? We would both strongly agree on that, I suspect. But I genuinely don't think much of it is performative. In fact, I think social media is designed to activate us and to make us very, very reactive and to keep us angry all the time. Like, I'm old enough to remember what politics was like before Facebook. And I'm not going to tell you it wasn't angry, but it was a very different beast. So I have to push back on that assumption of like non-genuineness or malintent there. I think it's all very real. I just don't think it's constructive.
I'm not saying that it's not real, right? I think people do genuinely believe in what they're talking about, but I do think people are more performative about it than they would need to be in a regular setting, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah. I guess if M&M's is like putting out, women's candy or whatever, that is virtue signaling, right?
Yeah.
Or Chris Rock talked about this in his special with like anti-racist Lululemon pants.
Yeah.
That's virtue signaling.
Yeah.
I just, I think it's a relatively minor part of the discourse in my estimation.
Sure. Yeah, certainly. Did you have any other questions or?
I'm good to go. I'm so honored to be on your stream. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for answering all my questions. I know that it was very chaotic time and probably very traumatizing, and I may have more questions for you in the future. I'm just getting started in my big deep dive on it. So.
Oh my goodness. I would love to hang out again and talk about something else. And no, honestly, like bringing forward those questions and allowing me the chance to talk about some of these Gamergate falsities about me. I think people can watch the video and seeing I'm being very genuine in my response. So it's a real opportunity to just refute something that's not true. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everything. I hope you have a great day.
We'll hang out soon. Talk soon.
Thank you soon. Talk to you soon. Bye.